My name's Forrest Longman, and I am the board president of City Club. The mission of City Club is to inform, connect, and engage our community to strengthen the civic health of our region. We emphasize civil conversations and listening to others. We begin by acknowledging with humility that the land where we are today is the territory of the people of the Salish Sea. Their presence is imbued in the waterways, shorelines, valleys, and mountains of the traditional homelands of the Coast Salish people, and it has been that way since time immemorial. As always, I'd like to thank all our volunteers who make programs possible. As always, I'd like to thank KMRE board member Robert Clark, who's producing today's program, and BTV10, who will be broadcasting it to their viewers. I'd like to thank our sponsors for their support. First, we have our first supporting member of City Club announced today. That's Peace Health Medical Center, who is sponsoring us at a higher level. And then our contributing members, they are Bruce and Claudia Deasand, Danny Neal, of real estate broker with the Moyat Group, the Firehouse Arts and Events Center, Colshan CPAs, Opportunity Council, Pacific Continental Realty, Unity Care Northwest, Village Books, Western Washington University, Whatcom Community College, and the Whatcom Community Foundation.
Okay. My name is Robin Barker, and so for the introduction to the program, I will turn this over to Jane Bright.
Thank you, Robin. And thank you to all our panelists for being here, and thank you to our audience as well. I'm chair of the program committee, and today we have added a program to our schedule to really take a good look at the proposals for the jail initiative, and it's not an initiative, it's a proposal, and two initiatives which are for the city of Bellingham only, which involve minimum wage changes and some changes to the rental programs that we have. I'd first like to start by thanking our panelists because they've put in a whole lot of work on this. Unlike the way we do candidate forums, we sent the questions out to our panelists ahead of time in an effort to give them time to pull together the information that we were looking for, and in an effort to really make sure that our members and the public have as much information as possible to make an informed decision as they fill out their ballots in November. So I, again, thank the panelists and thank the members of the program committee for doing the work to try and get at questions that we think will provide some good information for all of you. So how this is going to work today is each panelist will, and just for each topic, we have panelists who's going to speak on behalf and one who will speak against, and each panelist will get a chance to summarize why they're taking the position that they are taking. And then, and in this case, and I'm going to use shorthand for the jail, which has a longer title certainly, but for the jail proposal, they will have 5 minutes to do a summary of their position, and then we will start asking questions, and they will have 2 minutes each to respond, and they will get a prompt at when they're 15 seconds from the end of the 2 minutes, and then a stop sign. And we will also time their opening statements. For the minimum wage and the rental proposals, they will have 2 minutes to do their summary, and then also 2 minutes for each question. So let's get started with the public health, safety, and justice proposal. And we have two speakers. Our speakers include Peter Frazier, who is chair of the Yes, Safe Jail, Healthy Outcomes campaign. And he is member of the Justice Project Stakeholder Advisory Committee and of the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force Behavioral Health Committee. Peter is a user experience consultant and entrepreneur now focused on local government reforms and innovations. He is a lifelong resident of Chuckanut. Josh Soretti is a board secretary for the Whatcom Peace and Justice Center, a delegate to the Northwest Washington Central Labor Council, and an associate professor of history and women in gender and sexuality studies at Western Washington University. So thank you both. And Peter, why don't we start with you with your 5 minutes to give us an idea of what it is and why you support this proposal.
Thank you so much for having me today at City Club. I very much appreciate it. I was, as you said, born in Whatcom County. I've spent most of my career as a consultant. I am fortunate enough to live on Chucknut Drive. And in those years, I was involved in boards and my community and such. But really, it wasn't until that I was developing both Heliotrope Hotel and Hotel Leo that I was put in contact with folks in our downtown who were suffering greatly from behavioral health crises. And also I was exposed to um, the crime and chaos that have erupted over the last 4 years. And I could see pretty clearly that the current jail was part of our problem, but it goes so much further than that. We have a criminal justice system and a behavioral health system that is broken and in great need of reform and innovation and improvement. And that's when I began to get involved with I got on the Stakeholder Advisory Committee for the Justice Project, and I have joined the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force Behavioral Health Committee. And these issues are something that we have been suffering with for some period of time. I am going to remind people that 45 years ago, we deinstitutionalized our mental health system. And the idea was to bring it back to our communities. And it never came along with the funding and the infrastructure that was needed. And where did people suffering these problems go? Well, they went to the streets and they went into our jails, which is absolutely not a good, right, or humane way to deal with these problems. So our current jail, I soon discovered in my research and such, is dangerous. It's expensive to run, and it is unhealthy. It's unsafe for the people who work there and who are incarcerated there. It has no smoke evacuation system. It's a fire trap. It is a financial and legal liability to the people of Whatcom County. We could be sued to a great, a great degree. Figures are around $500 million for a catastrophic event, 4 times the cost of building a new jail. We're wasting millions of dollars trying to keep this facility, just maintaining this facility. And the overcrowding that we're experiencing, because it's a 1984 jail. It was built for a Whatcom County from years ago. That overcrowding means limited visitation with family and with legal. It means that we don't have the room for medical and behavioral health services. We don't have addiction treatment. We don't have even have room for Narcotics Anonymous or even Alcoholics Anonymous group meeting. It means that repeat offenders are often released to the street because we don't have enough room and we have booking restrictions. We've had them since 2015. And I think the citizens of Whatcom County have seen what that means. But I am going to tell you right now, we have an excellent plan, and we'll be talking about it shortly in the questions. But we have a comprehensive plan put together by a broad group of citizens who have done the work this time in 2023, as opposed to 2015 and 2017. for a plan for a jail and behavioral care center that is humane and it's part of a whole constellation of services, of facilities. And these are the answers that for Whatcom County to this failure of 45 years. And I look forward to answering your questions about this.
Thank you. Josh, if you would unmute and give us your summary, and you will have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Jane, and thanks to the organizers as well as the audience. We need to vote no on Prop 4 in November because Whatcom County needs to chart a new course on public safety. This proposal is functionally the same as the proposals that voters rejected in 2015 and 2017. And if there had been a broad process of public input that was actually taken into account, we wouldn't be seeing once again a 0.2% sales tax to build a big flat jail up in Ferndale. What we're looking at here is the wrong funding mechanism, a bad location, and no guarantees of services. And so when you see this plan, want to understand, first off, we're already paying 0.1% sales tax on every purchase in this county into a jail fund, and one that has clearly been mismanaged if this facility is failing in less years than I've been alive. City Hall was built in 1939. The Whatcom Museum was built in the 1890s. There are many buildings throughout this city that are much older than 40 years old, and none of them seem to be crumbling in the way that's alleged that this facility is. The tax we're being proposed here is a sales tax, and any economist will tell you that the sales tax is the most regressive way to raise funds. That's to say that for people who are low income, a greater proportion of their income is going to go to a sales tax than if we sought a different funding mechanism. This tax is also too big in that it's going to raise up to the statutory maximum our public safety tax. And that means that when we're thinking about future threats, the threats that we've actually faced in recent years, a respiratory pandemic that our public health department was not funded well enough to confront, the flooding in October 2021, other climate crises on the way, well, we'll have no ability to respond to those disasters because all of our sales tax will be locked up in this big flat facility out on La Bounty Road. And that's another real issue here, right? The proposed location is another reason that just like in 2015 and 2017, the voters need to reject this plan. The La Bounty Road location is in the Nooksack River floodplain. Look at aerial photos from the October 21 floods, and you can see that that site was inundated. Floods like that are going to happen more and more often. We shouldn't be developing flood-prone spaces for any reason, especially to house people in those places. If we're worried about the well-being of the people in that facility, why would we put them in this place where their lives are going to be at risk? Additionally, that area, a green space surrounded by wetlands, would be a bad idea to develop for any purposes. And it's one that's going to create a number of negative impacts, both up in the La Bounty Road area, as well as down in downtown Bellingham. We're going to move hundreds of living wage jobs out of downtown Bellingham. If you care about downtown, why would you want some of the best paid people in the city to no longer work in the city and instead have to commute? And of course, that is one of the central reasons we shouldn't be moving our jail 7 miles from the courthouse. Traveling back and forth is going to worsen I-5 congestion. It's going to worsen traffic downtown, and it's going to worsen the sprawl that we're experiencing in this county and are supposedly committed to reducing, right? And thinking about infill. This is the opposite of infill. It's taking a green space and paving it over so that everyone has to drive a long distance, big flat parking lots. It's not a good look for either downtown or La Bounty Road. And then when we're looking at this plan, we want to be really careful to see that no matter what the people in favor of this are wanting in terms of services. The reality is this proposal funds jail construction first and can potentially strangle our ability to actually fund services in the future. If we want services, then we should be funding services. This is a jail tax that they've tried to disguise as funding services, even though we know that years of the funding will be 100% dedicated to jail construction. And after that, the cost of operation, as well as the debt service on the municipal bond that will be taken out, are always going to be coming before we get services funded. So a no vote on Prop 4 is the right choice for this county's future.
Thank you. Peter, we're going to start with you with the question, and I will ask the audience to pay attention to the questions because some of these are complex questions for a complex topic. The current jail capacity was built for 287, currently holding approximately 397 inmates, and approximately 60% of those folks are pre-trial. The proposal is for 440 beds, even with plans to divert people with mental health and addiction conditions to treatment. What is the justification for an analysis done that led to the 440 bed number? Shouldn't we be moving toward less incarceration instead of more? And you have 2 minutes.
We certainly have been moving towards less incarceration. The only people who are currently incarcerated are there for very serious felonies and offenses. So 440 beds, that is a figure that was used to get an estimate to compare the 3 different locations that the county council needed to look at: Iron Gate, downtown, and LaBounty Road. And so there is a formula that will be used, a process closer to design, to come up with the actual number of cells and capacity.
Thank you. Josh, the next question is for you. If this proposal fails, with the current jail now full and increasing frustration with perceived crime across the county, how do you propose to provide adequate public safety and pay for it?
Thank you. Yes, so first off, we want to understand that the jail population is not some fact of nature. It is rather a policy decision. The idea that everybody in that jail is in there because they're dangerous is false. The vast majority of people on any given day, 90 to 98% of people in that jail are pre-trial. They're people who have not been convicted of any crime. Many of them are being held while they await competency restoration. Competency restoration means that a medical professional has judged this person to not be capable of understanding the charges against them, okay? And so these are people that are vulnerable. They're not people that are dangerous. And this imaginary that we live in some world that is populated with a mugger around every corner is a fantasy, right? And I think the question very nicely put it, the perceived increase in crime. Because if you look at the sheriff's office statistics from September of 2023, we can see a 50% decline in all kinds of property crimes over the last year. Though our perception might be that things are worse forever, we want to recognize that this is not bared out in the evidence or the statistics, nor is the idea that incarceration is going to make us safer a reality, okay? We know that crime rates vary depending on what is specifically criminalized. You could see in the 1970s, when the city stopped arresting people for public drunkenness, that the jail population caved dramatically. There are a number of policy decisions that could be made to keep the population down. And overall, we want to chart a new course on public safety. We've had an approach that really focused on punishment and incarceration. It hasn't worked. We need to go in a new direction.
Thank you. And Josh, we're going to stick with you. It is generally agreed that, except for where juveniles are kept, the condition of the current jail is inhumane to both inmates many of whom have not been tried and could be found innocent, and to employees. How would you address such conditions, and what would it cost if the proposal fails and during the construction period if it passes?
Yeah, so I think once again, the fact that the juvenile area is judged as humane demonstrates that we can create facilities that meet the standards that people think are necessary. And in this case, right, we once again want to think about the opportunity cost involved in building a new facility. Many of us might recall in November 2017 when Design to Last presented a rehabilitation plan for the jail, one that was much less expensive than any new construction would be. This plan was ignored, like many options to invest in maintaining that building. What we could do is use the work center in order to move some people out and do renovations that make this a safe place for people to work. But more importantly, what we have to do is address this policy-driven overcrowding to make that happen. Certainly, we want people to be working in safe places throughout this county, and we want people to get the care that they need. It doesn't have to happen in a jail facility, and a jail facility is not a therapeutic space. So we shouldn't be concentrating care in there. We should think about making the place safer by keeping the population down, about doing necessary maintenance, and not allowing decades of deferred maintenance then hold the taxpayers hostage to having to build a new facility for the people who weren't able to keep this facility in functional shape even for 30 or 40 years. You know, we want to think about, why would we trust the same people who drove this building into the ground to not do the same and potentially have a crumbling facility on LaBounty Road before the bond is even paid off?
Thank you. Next question is for Peter. The survey completed in 2022 showed that approximately 60% of prisoners held pretrial remain incarcerated because they could not meet bail. The state Supreme Court of Illinois recently abolished cash bail. Would you support Washington eliminating cash bail in nonviolent cases, and how would that affect the planning for the jail?
I would be very interested in hearing arguments for and against a cash bail system. The fact of the matter is that it is part of Washington State's Constitution to afford people bail, the option of bail. And this county has done a lot of work. You wouldn't know it from what Josh has been talking about, but we have a pretrial processes work group that has done a great deal of work to make sure that we use a pretrial risk assessment tool to make sure this is a race neutral a risk assessment tool that allows us to make really good decisions around, or allows judges to make really good decisions and lower the incidence of people needing to be in jail pre-trial. I believe that Whatcom County has done the very hard work to do a great deal of diversion through the LEAD program, the GRACE program, and many other ways of keeping people who should not be in our jail pretrial out with electronic home monitoring and other methods. And the fact of the matter is it's true. The people who are in the jail right now are there because they're either a great flight risk or they are a danger to our community.
Thank you. And Peter, we'll stick with you. With 20% of the sales tax apportioned to each city to use at their discretion, and Linden already expected to spend theirs on firefighters, which cities have irrevocably committed their share of the sales tax to the jail? How has this commitment been memorialized, and is it subject to change of mind by the relevant city council in the annual budget process?
Oh, let's see. That's a confusing question, probably. So the way that this is set up is that 60% of levy funds will be going to the county and 40 to the cities. In the first 4 to 6 years, to lower the cost of the bond to about 100 million, to something that we can afford, the cities have pledged and will be codifying the half of that money is going back to the county, and that will in the first 4 to 6 years. Of those remaining funds, in the first 4 to 6 years, Bellingham has committed to 50% of that going to behavioral health. In the meantime, we have about $7 million in a fund with $7 million more coming in each year for behavioral health. And those funds will be covering the implementation plan, this constellation of great projects for improving our criminal justice and behavioral health system. So there is no gap in behavioral health funding in this process.
I'm taking you out.
Robin, I think, could you please mute? I think
I'm
you're
sorry.
still- Thank you.
Well,
Peter, just a clarifying question on that. You
Yeah.
said that the funds will go back to the county.
Yeah.
What discretion does the county have to use it for something other than jail construction?
The county?
Yes.
Oh, you're referring to the county. So those monies are in the first 4 to 6 years will be going to design and construction. And there is about $7 million or so in a fund to kick off the process. And the bonding would not take place until those monies have run out. So that would be maybe 2026 or something where the bonding would happen. Does that help?
No, no, but let's move on because we've got some other questions.
Okay.
And thank you, Josh. This one's for you. The financing of the jail involves paying back bonds with sales taxes. And during COVID, we saw that sales taxes can vary, shall we say. So from your perspective, what would it take to stabilize the funding so we do not risk defaulting on the bonds?
Stabilize the funding. What we need to do is not build a new jail. And this is something that County Treasurer Stephen Oliver has warned us about, the idea of building a facility, $150 million facility, is just beyond our means. Anybody, and it's, I think we're all well aware, or many of us are well aware of the rise in interest rates, right? And that's something that Whatcom County is not immune from. This is not a good time to take out a municipal bond. It is not like the easy money days from 2008 up until 2020. And yes, we've seen really clearly the idea that sales tax is going to continue to generate large funds is really subject to a lot of change. Look at the Bellingham International Airport or the Bellisphere Mall to see some of the results of really investing in the idea that there's always going to be a lot of Canadians coming down and shopping here. The reality is those revenues dry up due to forces that are totally out of our control. So if we want to really plan for our future, what we should be doing is really focusing in on the maintenance of the resources we already have. Instead of building giant new facilities with a blurry future for funding, we really need to focus in on the threats that we actually might face in the coming decades, the ongoing climate crisis, to actually get at some of these issues instead of building a facility that's going to lock us in to an enormous amount of expenses, a huge mortgage on that municipal bond, when what we've seen is that this county can't keep a facility functional even for 40 years. And so I don't think it's a good investment. And if we are worried about this county's finances, the last thing we should do is build a huge new facility that will be on the hook for the bond and increased operational costs.
Thank you. And this is going to be a question for both of you. And we will start with Peter. The Ferndale location is controversial. And from the pro of providing more space to the con of future burdening public defenders of time lost to travel. So Peter, make the case for the Ferndale location, and then we'll switch to Josh to make the case against.
Well, the Ferndale location is really an excellent location for us. The horizontal facility that can go there, it can't be done in the other two locations. And this is going to keep our costs lower, and it allows us to right size the jail. And if in the future we need to expand it, we will be able to expand at the La Bounty location. It's 12 to 15 minutes from the courthouse. I will point out that both our prosecutors and our public defenders' offices are in support of a new jail, as are Steve Oliver, who was mentioned before, our treasurer, who thinks that this is a good plan, and all of our both people running for mayor, both people running for sheriff, everybody who is on a city council in Whatcom County approves of this plan and this location. All the mayors of each city approve of this location, and it is where we can build a good, humane facility and replace the one that is never going to be able to offer the sort of behavioral health and treatment that we absolutely need. The current location has been shown and proven by the people, the consultants that have been hired by Whatcom County, to be absolutely unable to fit the sort of population that we have and the needs that we have for our inmates and our staff.
Thank you. Josh, same question to you about Ferndale. What's the con position on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I've hit on a number of points why the Ferndale location is a bad one. And it's important to note that the voters roundly by 10 points rejected in 2017 when all of the city mayors and county council and all of these elected officials lined up behind the La Bounty Road plan. Nothing has changed about that plan. And so the voters should once again not trust the officials who want to get a blank check to build, as Peter said, a potentially endlessly expandable facility, right? And that's a real concern here, that the main argument in favor of La Bounty Road is the idea that we're not going to have a 440 bed facility. We're going to have an 800 or 1200 or 1600 bed facility there, which is absolutely unreasonable and is a really bad plan for our future. La Bounty Road location, as I said, is in a floodplain. It's a dangerous place to put anything. That site was also the charnel yard for a tannery. It's a place that probably you shouldn't be digging into the ground for development. It's a place that is going to be overwhelmed with the additional traffic that is created by this. If you've sat in congestion on I-5, just wait until if this plan goes through, how much additional back and forth is going to be necessary for this. The La Bounty Road site is a terrible idea. If you go to any large city all over this country, they have ways of building facilities that have services that are very modern in cities that are much more crowded with much higher property values than Bellingham. So the idea that we are permanently locked into the La Bounty Road facility is false and is based on what the DLR group said 20 years ago, an absolutely outdated and unreasonable estimate, one that doesn't comport with reality. And so the La Bounty Road location just shows you this is the same proposal that we rejected in 2017 and 15.
Thank you. Peter, the next one is for you. No, Josh, I think we're sticking with you on this one, but sticking with the siting options. The county has two other sites upon which the jail might be built or rebuilt. Remodel the current jail or build a new facility on the parking lot immediately south of the courthouse and expand the minimum security facility in the Iron Gate industrial area. What are the pros and cons of both of these? And let's see, I think we're starting with Peter. I'm sorry about that, Peter. What's the argument for not doing a rebuild somewhere?
Oh, okay. So it is critical that we not overspend on the facility itself. And the other locations, Iron Gate and in the Civic Center, have been shown to be exceedingly expensive. And because you have a small footprint, you have to go vertical. You can't, you would have to build for 40 years of capacity. And we don't want to do that because it is absolutely essential that we be able to fund behavioral health and criminal justice reforms and innovations as the implementation plan, the 15 project plan that was put together by a broad group of citizens and professionals here in this county over the last couple of years. If we're going to be able to afford to do that work and to have the behavioral health workers and facilities and programs that we need to face the issues that we have going on right now and seem to be growing with this fentanyl and methamphetamine crisis, we cannot overspend on a jail. And La Bounty is a good location. It is less expensive, and that allows us 50% over the life of this levy, 50% of funds to go into behavioral health funding for the implementation plan. I highly recommend you look at this implementation plan and read it and see what we have in store for Whatcom County. It's a good plan, and this is how we can afford it. It's the funding mechanism for doing that.
Thank you. Josh, make the argument to do a remodel or an upgrade and use the facilities or the locations that we now have, please.
Sure. So I think that there are a lot of different right answers potentially here. But Proposition 4 is the wrong answer. La Bounty Road is the wrong answer. And I would encourage people to read the opinions and the statements put out by Jason McGill from Northwest Youth Services or Atul Deshmane, who were both on that committee and both rejected that plan and wrote very eloquently and thoughtfully against that plan put out. And so we can see that there is not unanimous consent amongst the people who are actually involved in this process and providing services for people. A downtown location is attached to the current courthouse. To get people to their hearings, you need to be close. And that is a process, a schematic that we've seen all over the country for a long time. Jail close to the courthouse reduces the amount of complications of getting people to trial, getting people to hearings, which is I understand that people like to think about folks in the jail in very degrading ways, but they are human beings and they have rights. They have constitutional rights that we can't just trample over because we think it's cheaper or we think it's more fiscally responsible. If we really want to be fiscally responsible, renovation is much cheaper than new building. And if we're concerned about overspending, a new building is always going to cost much more. The Iron Gate Work Center is a great example of creating something that allows people who are in the system to continue their lives. We know that a lot of the homelessness in this county is caused by the jail, is caused by incarceration. tons of people lose their home because they're incarcerated. If we had more options where people could continue working their jobs, connecting to their communities, and being with their families instead of locked up in a cage miles away from Bellingham 24/7, well, we would do a lot better in a number of ways.
Thank you, Josh. Let's pick up on the fentanyl reference you had. The growing fentanyl crisis and the illicit drug trafficking to distribute it is costing lives, ruining families, and costing society. Such crime is of significant concern, and drug dealers should be removed from the streets. With the current jail at maximum capacity, how can Whatcom County respond when drug dealers are arrested?
Was that to me or to Peter?
It's for you.
Oh, for me, for sure.
Sorry.
Yeah. So in 1909, Washington State criminalized being a habitual user of opium. At that time, there were maybe 100 or 200 people who were addicted to opiates in this state. 114 years later, we're in total crisis mode because we have always had the wrong response to addiction. It seems like it is very difficult for people to understand that the very definition of substance abuse disorder is continued usage despite negative consequences. You can't punish people out of addiction. And the idea that you can has been the same failed war on drugs policies that we saw
Josh,
for over 100 years.
I'm going to interrupt because I was not asking about users. I was asking about dealers. What do we do with the dealers?
Okay. I mean, the whole, if there's no users, there's no dealers. So I think, again, the Whatcom County is not a place where the Whatcom County courts and jails are not having some kind of huge raft of drug dealers that they're dealing with. But what we see is, once again, incarcerating dealers doesn't do anything. You put a dealer in jail, you put 100 dealers in jail. The next day, there are new people out on the street selling. That we saw with crack cocaine, that we saw with heroin, with oxycodone, and now with fentanyl. All of these things emerged due to the failure of incarceration to be effective at stopping drug dealing or drug use. So what we need to do is to actually invest in drug addiction treatment, have it be voluntary, not have people have to go into jail to access it, which also opens up new funding streams because incarcerated people cannot get Medicaid reimbursement, but non-incarcerated people seeking treatment can. So treatment, drug dealing is not stopped by incarcerating drug dealers. It's an unreasonable approach given the evidence we've seen for 114 years.
Thank you, Josh. Peter, the next question is for you. The jail proposals failed to pass in 2015 and again in 2017. So what's different about this proposal to incentivize voters to support it?
Well, those proposals were crafted by law enforcement and the county executive's office at the time. And in fact, as a progressive, I voted against the proposal in 2017, and for good reason. We had not done the work. We had not done the work for diversion and for behavioral health and drug treatment here in Whatcom County. We just hadn't. And the people who were on the no committee at the time made a very good argument for it. However, since 2017, this county has done the work. It really has done the work, and it's done so not led just by law enforcement and the county executive's office, but by a broad group of citizens and professionals and elected leaders in the Stakeholder Advisory Committee to put together a plan that is, as I have said before, is the answer to our 45 years of misery. We have also been working very hard during those years to put in place such programs as LEAD and GRACE and other programs that would help us to divert people who shouldn't be in jail and to offer supports. And that is just the beginning. And the levy that we're talking about today is the funding mechanism for all the good things that Josh intends for us to do. It also provides a safe and humane jail at La Bounty that will never be able to be built in our downtown.
Thank you. Peter, the next question is also for you. And this is one of these complicated ones in terms of the funding. So the proposal accumulates the sales taxes over many years until it is paid and spends all that tax money raised in the first 4 years on construction. So proponents argue that the mental health needs in the interim will be met by other funds, and that the funds in the proposal are needed for the longer term. So make the argument. How is that going to work in terms of the funds coming in the longer term?
Well, in the short term, we do have monies both here locally, and our 40th and 42nd legislators are working hard to bring behavioral health money here to Whatcom County. And so in the short term, we've got it covered while we're building the new jail and behavioral care center. In the long term, I was just doing some figuring here. We have, in 2030, we'll be bringing in about $6.3 million for the implementation plan, behavioral health and criminal justice projects that we desperately need. By 2035, it'd be 9 million. By 2040, that's 12.4 million. And that's the sort of funding that we need, along with state funds that are, behavioral health is a state responsibility. Plus we have our
And
Yes.
and I'm going to interrupt because I mangled the question. The real question is the funds short term, are they guaranteed? You talked about
well, we have a 0.1% sales tax here locally for behavioral health. And we have, I believe, $7 or $8 million in that fund. That's going to help cover us. Plus, we got $9 million in this last legislative session for a critical 23-hour crisis facility. And there is a letter that people can review from our state legislators in their dedication to funding the implementation plan, rather. Yes.
Thank you, and I apologize for mangling that question.
That's all right.
Josh, there is broad support to increase mental health services, including addiction treatment throughout the community. Proponents have cited other funds to provide such services before the jail proposal generates enough non-construction cash, and that the proposal is needed for mental health and addiction treatment in the longer term. So if the proposal fails, how would we pay for such long-term, stable mental health services?
Yeah, so as Peter just mentioned, there are a variety of funding mechanisms in place. We already pay a 0.1% sales tax for behavioral health here. We've not been given the option as voters to consider, if we're having a behavioral health crisis, why are we voting on a jail tax instead of a behavioral health tax, right? We could use the sales tax to fund that. We could be given the option, or the voters could be given the option to actually choose between these things, because the county only has so many resources and we only have so many resources to give. Investing now in the jail is going to get in the way of being able to invest in behavioral health and these other services. There are certainly state and federal funds that could also be accessed. And all of this, right, is all going to be delayed by focusing on a jail that is not going to come online for 5 to 7 years. If we feel like conditions in the jail are currently inhumane, then we have an obligation to do something much faster than just continuing to let that facility decline for the next 5 or 6 years while we wait for this new one to come online. There are a lot of different ways we could look at the county budget where we can see that we are spending a great deal more, a much higher proportion on punishment on our criminal legal system than we are on things like public health and services. So we need to look at the county budget overall, and we also need to think about these multiple levels that are in place in terms of what the cities can do, what the county can do, what the state can do, what the federal government can do, and also potentially what philanthropy and private donations could do if people were willing to get past this idea that a jail is going to solve all of our problems, which is a really unrealistic solution when we know there are so many bottlenecks and pain points in our system that we're not investing in.
Thank you. Josh, stick with you. The current jail was built in 1984. At some point, it will need major renovations or replacement, and one could argue that it will not get less expensive over time. Given the age and condition of the building, why not replace it now?
I suppose that question could be asked of every single resource the county has, right? And every building we have in town. I mean, Bellingham City Hall, built in 1939, eventually it may need to be replaced. So why not tear it down now and put something new there? That's not a reasonable way to approach our finances or the public heritage that's held in so many of these buildings. As I've mentioned, we've got 1858 buildings in town that have been maintained. Go to the Territorial Courthouse, built in 1858 on the corner of Holly and D. It's still standing, right? And yet somehow we're supposed to believe that because this building is 40 years old, it needs to be torn down. Well, that's simply not true. And the idea that it's only going to get more expensive might be true in some long-term ways, but right now, due to high interest rates, the idea of taking on any additional debt is a particularly bad choice. What we can see is that interest rates vary over time, and they don't simply just go up. Right now is a really bad time to take out a mortgage, a really bad time to take out a municipal bond. And so projects requiring municipal bonds might be cheaper in a few years when interest rates go down. This is probably the worst time possible to do it. But really what we need to do, if we're serious about keeping fiscal responsibility, is we need to maintain the resources we have and not let the idea that in some future day it's not going to be usable or it's going to be more expensive to fix drive us to really destroy the resources we have and make it so that we end up burdened with even more cost for this new construction and for potentially having to build something new attached to the courthouse downtown.
Thank you. And our last question, though we could go on for a long time on this topic, it goes to Peter. King County has tried unsuccessfully to fold behavioral health and addiction treatments into their jail. What is different about this proposal that would lead to success?
I'm not sure. You'd have to cite your sources on that one, Jane, because when I reached out to King County, they found that jail-based program resulted in 73% reduction in jail bookings for those served in the program. So that does sound like it's pretty good, though I believe that I don't know that much about it, but what we're proposing is very different in that it is a behavioral care center like the one that our delegation from Whatcom County saw in Nashville. It is on the same site as the jail, but it is separate. It feels very different. It is a voluntary facility that it's a very interesting system that they have. It's one where a prosecutor and a public defender and a mental health person each morning get together. They see who's coming into the system, and then they divert the candidates into the behavioral care center. And it feels more like a medical facility or a college facility, and they are there voluntarily. and they serve out their sentences there up to 40 days, and they get the treatment that they need. And I don't know where Josh has gotten this idea that you shouldn't have services in a jail, because that's where you're going to find people who are suffering from and need treatment. And we'll have a whole host of community-based solutions, but let's approach people in the jail and always have an open door for people who need treatment.
Thank you. And again, I cannot thank you enough, both of you, for the thought and the time to help educate us on this very, very important question for the community. So again, thank you for your time. And just a quick note to our audience, we are not taking questions from the audience at this time, and we have turned off chat so as not to have a distraction. So, okay, we are going to move on to the rental. This requires landlords to pay 120 days worth of rent to help people relocate if their rent goes up more than 8%. So let me introduce, if I can find my introductions, Carrie and Perry. Thank you. Carrie, are you with us?
I am.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. Carrie Burnside is an organizer with the Bellingham Tenants Union. The BTU fights to achieve dignity and security for all our tenants by ensuring access to safe, healthy, and affordable homes. They do this by building the political and economic power of tenants through civic engagement, solidarity, and member-driven organizing. Perry is the Government Affairs Director for both the Whatcom County Association of Realtors and the Building Industry Association of Whatcom County. He is a graduate of the University of Montana with both a BS degree and his JD. He's a licensed attorney in Montana and Washington and maintains a small practice in Ferndale. So this first question, well, give a couple minutes to why you're either supporting or not supporting this initiative. Why don't we start with Perry?
Sure. Thank you, first of all, to the City Club for having me and allowing me to discuss this important topic with you. I want to make sure that everybody knows at the outset that I am speaking in my personal capacity. Neither the builders nor the realtors have taken a position on this initiative. And so I know there's a question coming up on that, so I'll talk more about that. I wanted to say at the outset, though, that the tack that I've taken with a lot of this is that renters need real solutions. We don't need a gimmick that gives you a short-term benefit in the very short term, and then ultimately in the long term ends up hurting renters even more. What do I mean by this? Everybody knows that rents are very high in Whatcom County. I mean, you pick up the Bellingham Herald on almost any given day, and there's going to be an article about why the rents are so high. And everybody agrees, I hope, that everyone deserves shelter. It's one of the needs that everybody has. And with regards to shelter, it needs to be safe and you need to be able to afford it. The problem with rental housing in Bellingham, at least from my perspective, is a problem that started about 20 years ago. I'm heading into the third comprehensive plan update that I've been involved in since arriving in Bellingham. And the perennial problem that we've had is that there was a decision made 20 years ago that we do not want more housing in Bellingham, or the housing we want is going to be of a certain type. And we are reaping those benefits today. The median home price in Bellingham, oh geez, that went really fast, is about $600,000, a little almost 700,000. The second part is that this cap on income for rentals is going to cause a problem with future construction. We'll get into more of that later on.
Thank you. Carrie, please mute and make your pitch for why we need it.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. And I really want to thank everyone that's taking the time to learn more about this. I am the Silver Beach Neighborhood Association president, and that is a reason why I got involved in learning more about the housing crisis, what that means, how that's impacting individuals directly. Where I live, grew up here in Bellingham, love this community. I've seen it go through a lot of changes, a lot of comprehensive plans. And where I live, there's 112 units. It's historically been naturally occurring affordable housing. And unfortunately, we had what the industry calls a vulture company come from out of state, purchase it. And despite having multiple code violations, are raising rents 20 to 30% just this year alone. So what we are watching are seniors and those on a fixed income and families with children going from having secure, stable housing directly into homelessness. And it's happening across Whatcom County. Just in this unit particularly, I had two individuals that literally had to live out of their car because of the backlog and high demand of services. And I cannot stomach a community that allows our hardworking seniors in their age of retirement to live out of their cars. So I support Initiative 2. It's not a cap. We'll talk about that more later. It's not short term. It's one small piece in a very comprehensive plan that needs to happen. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And this is going to be a question for both of you, but we'll start with Carrie. It's broadly agreed that Bellingham lacks enough supply of rental units to create competition amongst landlords and the major cause of high rents. However, economists generally oppose price caps, such as the cap proposed on rent, as they can lead to supply shortages. How would this affect the supply of rental units in Bellingham?
This is a really good question. There's some really important pieces in here I want to bring up. Initiative 2 is not a cap. The industry is allowed to continue raising rents at whatever they deem is necessary. So there's absolutely not a cap. It's really important to differentiate with that. Also, when I recently was invited to participate in the roundtable group with Governor Inslee last week, we had Todd Keller there, Department of Commerce, Senator Rammel, Representative Rammel, Senator Lovelet. We had property managers there, specifically Daylight Properties, who has an internal 3% cap on their rent increases and have adjusted their business to be able to accommodate it. So it's one, it's doable. Two, doesn't impact supply at all. Then in addition, there were service providers, developers. Developers spoke about the issue is not, yes, we need more affordable housing, and the issues they face in providing that are the numerous codes and steps that will prolong building and cause building to cost more through permits, the permitting process, and through permits being delayed. So again, this is so complicated. It's really important that people start to understand really what are the root cause issues, what's actually happening in Whatcom County. Actually, Perry mentioned 20 years ago, 25 years ago specifically, CHAT was created, the Countywide Housing Affordability Task Force. And this group spent 2 years researching and came up with, that went really fast. We failed. Fruition was we were supposed to see the fruits of that labor in 2023, but what we ended up finding is that homelessness went up 27%, specifically in seniors from 2019, 141%. Sorry.
Now, usually candidates have a minute and a half, so we thought this is pretty generous for 2 minutes. Okay. Perry, you want to take on what this is going to do to housing shortages?
Carrie touched on the biggest one, which is the fact that developers finding it more and more difficult every week to proceed with projects. The primary concern that I have with regard to this one, and the best example that I could find of this situation, is the city of St. Paul instituted a cap. I'm going to call it a cap, like this one, and within a year, the permitting for multifamily apartment buildings and housing structures that were more like apartments and housing tenants dropped 82%. Bellingham can't afford something like that either. We need to be making it more and more possible to build these things. And what a lot of people don't realize is the financing for these projects depends on the net income versus the value. And when you're limiting the net income or compressing what that net value is going to be, then you make the financing for these projects much, much more risky. And as a result of that, the people that finance the projects themselves become much more difficult to make financially viable. And then you end up having to go chase limited public dollars to try and subsidize all of that housing. And it really ends up in a situation where you are not building the very exact type of housing that we need to be providing in order to keep rents at a much, much more manageable level.
Thank you. Perry, let's stick with you. And I understand you are not representing the industry, but our understanding is the industry is against this initiative. So we'll assume that in this question. What would landlords suggest to help struggling families stay housed?
That's a really, really good question. I think Carrie pointed out that a lot of individuals, I know my own father with his rentals, he tries to find good families and then make sure that they can stay in the house that they provide. I'm always talking to him about, you could get so much more rent for your units. And he says, but I'm not concerned about that. I'm more concerned that the tenants move in, they are good to us, they pay on time, and they keep the place in good order. I think that's the main thing that landlords would like people to know is that, tenants with the present possessory interest of that unit are the ones that are in the best position to keep their eyes on a unit and keep things maintained and updated and let the landlord know of problems. I think that's the biggest key to this is communication between the two. With regard to the industry, I do have to tell you, when I took this on, I presumed I would be writing the con statement, right? When I went to landlords and property management firms, the response was, no, we're not really interested in helping you because, it's a boon to us. We get to charge 7.8, 7.9%, no questions asked. And the only justification we need is the fact that, if you're going to limit our income, we're going to have to save in the good years and spend in the bad years. And so everybody's kind of like, we have a plan on how to respond to this. And unfortunately, when I hear those plans, I get a little bit nervous for tenants because they start talking about things like lease terms being shortened and maybe we need to institute cost sharing measures with tenants and all of these sorts of things. And that's that long run I'm talking about. Short-term gain for the tenants right now, but as the industry adjusts, I think it's going to end up in situations where the tenants are not very happy.
Thank you. Let's pick up on something that Perry just mentioned, and we will go to Carrie. And this is going to sound like a math problem. If the market rates are climbing at 4%, with the increase capped at 8%, what's to keep landlords from raising rent 7.99%, even if there is, and even if it's beyond what's going on in the market? Unmute, please.
Mute. There we go. Sorry, I couldn't get it to unmute. Oh boy, this is challenging because there are a lot of things there that I'd like to fact check that Perry said, especially St. Paul. I'm very familiar with that. And I'm seriously questioning a lot of what was said. But with this question, again, it's not a cap. It's really important that people understand this isn't a cap. Also, I talk to literally thousands of tenants throughout the work that I do. We survey, we table, we door knock, and we've been collecting data because currently landlords are not required to disclose how much rent increase is going up. So it's really difficult to actually know what we're looking at for rent increases. I can tell you it's not 4%. We're seeing 20 to 30% on average across the larger, not smaller landlords, but the larger companies which compromises the majority of them. So when we talk to tenants, even if they end up everyone doing a 7.9%, 99% increase, that is so much better than the 20 to 30%, the $300 to $500 a month that they're incurring now. And this will only kick in if they choose to raise the rent that price and the tenant can't afford, the tenant chooses to leave. Nobody likes to move. And so it's going to be a small percentage of people that actually do benefit from this, but it will provide them with that lifeline that helps them with the moving cost. Instead of deferring the cost to taxpayers, it goes to the company that's causing the harm, who does not pay B&O tax. And in a lot of cases, these profits are leaving our economy, leaving our renters with less discretionary spending, putting less money in restaurants, in small, our local businesses. And so, again, I really want to stress it's not a cap. They're free to raise it whatever they want. Daylight Properties and other companies and small landlords will not be raising their rent above 3% because there are, like Perry said, many ethical people out there that are able to adjust their business and maintain 3%. Thank you.
Just to clarify, our understanding of the way it is written is that, well, it's not a cap. A landlord would have to pay 3 months of rent to somebody who needed to relocate because they could not afford anything at 8% above. So while it's not a cap, there is a financial cost to the landlords. Now, is any disagreement with that summary? Okay, let's move on. This is for Carrie. The initiative exempts properties with 4 or fewer units. Which landlords is this initiative designed for and why? And why did you choose to treat owner-occupied rentals of any size and those that outsource the rental management the same?
The biggest piece in this is, I think in some of the questions you referred to them as bad actors. I know in the industry, they're called vultures. And so this initiative is going after the vulture investors and property management, property owners. It differentiates between a landlord who lives on their property and rents out up to 3 additional spaces. So 4 in total, including the person living there. And then a landlord who uses the property strictly as an investment portfolio. Those are very different. One is it's their home and they're renting, supplement income, or they're renting out their additional units. The other is strictly a business, again, doesn't pay B&O tax. I think it's important to differentiate between the two. And I do want to also mention, when someone is displaced, the cost to get them housed again, if they become homeless, the cost becomes astronomical, and that burden is placed on taxpayers. And so this initiative shifts the burden from taxpayers to the business, doesn't pay B&O tax, who is profiting in record numbers, and they're having record high profit across the United States. It's putting the responsibility on them. And I think that's very important for taxpayers to understand that. Thank you.
Thank you. Perry, Carrie mentioned the bad actors, and this is a question about that. What is and should the rental industry be doing to self-regulate those bad actors? How will this ordinance affect the industry in Bellingham?
You think after 2 years, you get used to Zoom, right? The bad actors, I always tell people, one of the best things we can do, again, for tenants is this advocacy piece. For example, I work with the realtors. If you have a landlord that's a realtor, we have a code of ethics and we have a disciplinary process that the realtors can go through and actually take action against our members. The state has the same thing. If people have a professional license that's related to real estate, you can also file a complaint there and go against those individuals. This was one of the things that we talked about a lot with the city of Bellingham when they had the landlord tenant registration program. They were supposed to be out there and inspecting units on a regular basis. Even though the realtors pointed out that the city's program wasn't adequately staffed or even adequately put together to go forward if that's what they wanted to do. The mechanism is there. that those people who are perennially sort of, neglecting their properties and what have you, then they should have some sort of a consequence, right? Is what I said before. Everybody deserves safe, affordable housing. I think the biggest key here is, the word of mouth with social media. I go on the Facebook pages that are around Bellingham every once in a while, and we know who the bad actors are. The problem, though, that gets right to the heart of all of this and why the rents are going up, why rents are exorbitant, is that fundamental problem of there just isn't enough supply. If people had more choices, if there was a greater amount of supply, they would have the ability to shop around and get out of those situations. The greater supply would also bring those rents down, and people would have the greater ability to go out and find that better housing. It would regulate itself.
Harry, this one's also for you. How many instances of 8% rental increases have there been in Bellingham over the last 15 years? And what does that tell us?
Sure. So the one thing I didn't like about this program is you made me go do math. I went back through and checked the median rents for Bellingham starting in 2006 for studios 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom apartments, took the median rents across all of those years and calculated the increases. It was interesting what I found out. 2014, rents actually dropped down by almost 2%. 2016, rents dropped down again. 17, rents went up 9.1% for studios, but they were within the 8% for everything else. Here's where it got interesting. From 2019 to 2020, everything was above 8%, more like 11. The high was 13.7. And again, we hit it in 23. So when I go back and look at the significant issues that were there, the big thing that happened was 2020, the eviction moratorium went into place. 2021, landlords couldn't collect back rent from tenants who didn't pay unless they had some sort of a payment plan, a negotiated system to do that. And in 2023, you see those landlords that lost all the money during the eviction moratorium and the payment plan period. Now they're trying to recoup those losses. There was no protection for landlords during the pandemic era. They still had to pay their mortgages. They still had to maintain the properties. And all that money that went out without necessarily rents coming in, that's why you see those rental increases now. We know right now in Bellingham, it confirmed this with the city of Bellingham, they have a surplus of apartments right now. You've seen them all being built the last few years. And I know from talking to all the property managers that the rents are really stable. So.
Thank you. And our last question goes to Carrie. Describe how this would be enforced. By what personnel in the city, and will do the enforcement, and what will that have on the city's budget?
This would be similar to the rental registry program, which Perry mentioned, which is very broken, that City Council did audit and shared the results of how broken and on so many levels. And so when we allow landlords and realtors to self-audit, it runs amok really bad. And we can just look at the facts with that. This will have two prongs in how it will be enforced. And one is through Washington State law. They'll go to court. They can take their landlord to court. However, what is problematic is right now, a tenant really has no rights, even though the law does lay out what those are. In order to actually take it to court, you have to find an attorney that will represent you. There's no money in that to represent a tenant. Law Advocates is very overbooked. So is Northwest Justice Project, and they only represent those in a low income bracket. So for everyone outside of that, it makes it extremely difficult. The city would be the other option, and they could issue citations. The citations would then fund any staff that would need to be covered. So it would be built in within itself to cover the costs of it, and the city would determine, not citizens initiatives. The city would determine how that is done. And as Perry mentioned, the market is actually not stable. Rents have gone up significantly. It's much more complicated than just the information that he shared. And I really encourage people to delve in deeper, because when I started researching this back in January, I constantly find that there's so much misinformation, and the more we become educated, the better we can as a community start addressing this from a much more comprehensive way. But Initiative 2 is a good first step. Thank you.
And thank you both for this. I know that we've taken in a very short time covered a lot of information, and I can't thank you enough. And to our audience, I apologize because we are running over, and that's on me. So thank you both. And if we could get Lexi and Guy. Excellent. Hi there. Okay, thank you. Let me do a quick introduction. Lexi, I'm gonna do it, Lexi. I I laid it out. I did it wrong. Is a member. Thank you. Is a member of the bargaining committee for the Western Academic Workers United, the union of student employees at Western. They are the largest union in Whatcom County with over 2,500 members, and most of them make minimum wage. Guy Ogiogrosso has been a Chamber of Commerce leader in Whatcom County since 2006 and has proudly served the Bellingham Regional Chamber of Commerce since 2014. As its president and CEO, he is responsible for the overall management and direction of the Chamber and its staff. He also advocates for members and serves as a community convener, someone who facilitates and engages in conversations about policies that impact the economic health of the region. So if you want to do a quick summary of why you support the minimum wage increase, and Lexi, let's start with you.
Great. Thanks, Jane. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Lexi Adelot, and really excited to be here. Like Jane said, I am a member of the bargaining committee for WAWU up at Western. I'm also a local. I went to Seaholm High School. I've worked in K through 12 schools as a healthcare worker, a house cleaner, a fisher, and now I'm in graduate school up at Western studying local history. And I'm here to support initiative number 2023-01. It would raise the minimum wage in the city of Bellingham $2 over the next 2 years. I care deeply about Bellingham and our community, and I think raising the minimum wage is the best way to help low-wage workers and lift our neighbors and their children out of poverty. This ordinance would take effect in 2024 and would incrementally raise the city minimum wage, and it would gradually provide a fairer compensation for our workers. It's a thoughtful and balanced approach that acknowledges the realities of our local economy. The truth is that current statewide minimum wage falls short of meeting the rising cost of living in Bellingham. According to the National Low Income Housing Alliance, their 2022 report, a minimum wage worker here in Bellingham would need to work more than 2 full-time jobs just to afford an average 2-bedroom rental. But this initiative is not about abstract numbers. It's about the livelihoods of our neighbors, colleagues, coworkers, friends, and loved ones. When workers don't earn enough, they struggle to meet their basic needs like housing, childcare, and food, and they're forced to make difficult and impossible decisions. This isn't a matter of choice, it's a necessity for a lot of us. And by raising the minimum wage, we're not just addressing that financial gap between the wealthy and the working class, but we're fostering a more robust economy. And thanks again for letting me be here.
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jane. Thanks, City Club. Thanks for everyone attending. And Lexi, thanks to you for being here. Looking at the time, I will be brief so we can get through as many questions as possible. I think there's a difference between good intention and maybe not the best written policy. And the voters get the chance to decide on the policy, not necessarily the intention. We surveyed our members. 92% of our members say everyone will expect a wage bump, not just those making the minimum wage, but all along the wage spectrum. And if everyone gets an increase, The only thing that happens is an increasing cost, which decreases our affordability. And this is where I actually agree with the proponents, is we have an affordability issue in our community right now. Increasing the minimum wage is different than advocating for, let's say, a higher wage earners or higher wage jobs. Those are a little bit different things, different tools in the tool belt, if you will. So I will stop there.
Okay, thank you. Guy, we're going to stick with you. This is a question for both of you. With higher wages, will higher wages result in a stronger or weaker labor force? Will it raise prices to consumers and/or stimulate the economy? Guy?
Sure. So labor force impacts, how it was originally presented was layoffs. I don't think we'll see a layoff situation. We certainly could. I think what we would see, again, higher prices. That's what I'm almost assured will happen. What we would see is maybe a reduction in the number of hours someone would work. I think maybe part-time folks may see a bigger impact. I think we'll see operation hours change. So think levels of service could certainly impact workforce, the shifts that are available, the hours of operation, the days that businesses are open. I think it's important to understand that we often like to lump all businesses under one umbrella, and different industries just function differently. Their competitors are in different places. And so having this umbrella policy would impact different employers differently. You could look at business to consumer, think restaurants, retail, hospitality. Their reaction to this would be different than a business to business employer whose competitors may be nationwide or international.
Thank you. Lexi, same question to you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think this is an essential question, and it's the main questions that come up when we talk about raising the minimum wage. But to be clear, raising the minimum wage by $1 next year and $1 the next year will not result in higher unemployment, layoffs, or significantly impact the price of consumer goods. But it will make an incredible difference in the lives of low-wage workers and lift many of them and their children out of poverty. This really isn't a question that we need to speculate about. There have been numerous studies that have delved into the effects of minimum wage increases, including Seattle in the last few years, where they raised their minimum wage to over $18. And dozens of jurisdictions across the country have implemented these minimum wage increases, and there are ample peer-reviewed studies that look at employment levels and local prices. Really, the empirical research here is overwhelming. Small and moderate minimum wage increases do not impact employment levels, nor do they significantly impact prices. And if I have a couple more seconds, I'd really...
Well, actually, it's the next question. So why don't we just go right into it? So proponents say that more pay will stimulate spending in the local economy. What data do you have to support that? And what happened during COVID when essential workers received a bump in pay for that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think this is actually like pretty clear. When workers receive higher wages, they have more money to spend in their local communities. And it's not just about economic theory. It's a tangible reality that I think many of us have experienced. It's clear that without a living wage, workers don't have any discretionary spending, right? The majority of low-wage workers are rent burdened. They're skipping meals. They're choosing between their phone bill and prescriptions, to say nothing of parents who aren't able to afford childcare so that they can keep their jobs, right? If they don't have that money, then they can't spend it. And during the pandemic, yeah, essential workers across the country were able to receive temporary wage increases, and this extra income did provide immediate relief to those essential workers, and it did boost spending. One of the most comprehensive studies across 6 cities that implemented minimum wage, including Seattle, found a 10% increase in the minimum wage, increased earnings in the food service industry between 1.3 and 2.5%. So it improved profits for small businesses because these low-wage workers are more likely to spend their discretionary income locally than high-paid salary workers. It's actually really simple. When workers have more money, they can spend them like in our local economy.
Thank you, Guy. How much do you anticipate this change will cost Bellingham employers? How will they pay for it, particularly given the labor shortages? And what about smaller businesses in particular? Why wouldn't increased wages support growing a healthy workforce?
So addressing the first question, how much will it cost at the full fruition? So starting in May 2025, for a full-time employee, it'll cost at least about $4,000 extra, right? That is the $2 above the minimum wage. And again, when we look at what our members are telling us, 92% expect everyone along the wage spectrum will expect that wage bump. When we look at our community, we have a high proportion of smaller businesses, a lot of restaurants, a lot of retail. And when those wage earners across that entire spectrum and everyone else gets a wage bump, I do think costs will have to go up. I mean, we all generally speak about the cost of, let's say, food, for example. And to the point, yeah, I do think lower wage earners will get a bump, but the same things that they're spending on will also be going up.
Thank you. This is a question for both of you. And Guy, let's start with you. Why isn't this initiative needed?
That's a big question. In the purest form, this is a minimum wage bump that would extend to everyone. And the proponents are arguing that it's only for those at the lowest wages. And if that were the case, if an increased minimum wage would lead to greater affordability, our state has the highest minimum wage in the country. We should already be affordable, but we're not. So I don't know if this good intentioned policy addresses some of the primary issues impacting affordability.
Okay. Lexi, why is it needed?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, the current minimum wage is far from a living wage. They're typically based on old data that don't include like modern necessities like the internet or phone bills, other things people need to survive right now, to say nothing of the disparity across the state of Washington. It's more expensive to live in Bellingham than in other places. And yeah, I think that Guy is right that prices have already gone up. Like prices are up and workers are struggling to make ends meet and meet their basic needs. And raising the minimum wage, giving them more money so they can afford those things is one of the only and the best way to do that. And it is about raising from the bottom, right? Like how else do we address the lowest wage workers in our community than to raise the minimum wage like this? Yeah.
Okay. Lexi, let's stick with you. This is your last question. The cost of housing, one of the reasons being listed for a higher minimum wage, is an issue countywide. Why limit the increase in the minimum wage only to Bellingham?
Yeah, I think that this is an amazing question. I just want to mention that at Western, 3 out of 10, which is 30% of students experience housing insecurity every year. And yeah, I think that you're absolutely right, a countywide crisis, and every low-wage worker should be able to make a living wage. Absolutely no one should spend their lives working all of their time and still be unable to achieve a basic level of security and safety. And I think growing up here in Bellingham, like one of our virtues is taking care of each other. And I think we have the means and the ability to do that. And it's important that we do. I also want to announce that Community First Whatcom is actually launching a campaign for the county council to raise the minimum wage countywide in unincorporated areas, and they'll plan to follow that up in smaller cities as well. But I also think it's worth noting that Bellingham is actually a hub of low wage jobs. People in Bellingham on average make $20,000 less than in the county, and it's the economic base of Whatcom County. So I think it makes sense that we start here, and it's incredible, and I'm proud, and I hope that Bellingham does take this first step.
Thank you. And Guy, your last question, the last question of the day for everyone. Will this affect where new businesses locate and existing businesses relocate? If so, how?
Gosh, I wish I had that fortune teller ball. I do a lot of other things with it than just answer this question. I would like to ping back on the previous question. I think housing is one of the biggest cost burdens for our community across the board, across all wage earners. And I feel this policy is trying to address that. And I wish we would actually start addressing the lack of housing in our community. That's the previous initiative, I think, some of Perry's comments. But do I think existing businesses relocating out of Bellingham? I tend to think that's a little bit of a scare tactic. It certainly could happen. I think if your market is not in Bellingham, so if you're a business to business and if you're selling things to other places, it may make a lot more sense to move out into the county, or if the proponents are successful with the next endeavor, move elsewhere, right? And so that could be jobs leaving. I think that's a pretty small percentage. I do think it would have a pretty big negative impact, as do many of the, not pro-business policies that we have in our community does impact the lack of businesses moving here. And I think this goes back to my question of increasing the minimum wage versus having higher wage employers. We don't have a lot of high wage employers in our community because we make it difficult for businesses to thrive.
All right. Well, thank you, Lexi, and thank you, Guy, for your time, and for our audience for sticking with us, even though we've run over, and really appreciate it. I do want to mention that our next program will be in person at the Bellingham Yacht Club, and the topic will be artificial intelligence, and a little bit about what it is and what it means to our lives as we see it more in healthcare and business and education. So that should be an interesting one. And then the November 15th program will be about mental health, particularly for our younger folk and post-COVID. So thank you all for participating and for watching. Take care.